Welcome to APTN National News. I'm Melissa Ridgen. Well, Indigenous people in Quebec have historically had a tense relationship with the police. The Viens Commission was established in that province to look at root causes for that tension and make recommendations. The provincial government held a press conference on Monday to talk about some of the measures that it's taking to improve these relations. Quebec says it's investing almost $12 million to establish a team of officers and social service workers that will work closely with Indigenous people in 4 communities. Kitigan-Zibi Chief Dylan Whiteduck says that relations are actually improving with police.
I think it addresses some of the issues that we have at hand. I think they're doing a decent job so far. Thus, you know, I could think of 2 occurrences that was helped out. Number 1, last year when the whole moose moratorium happened, the police officers didn't actually target the First Nations. They actually helped and protected our people. We should take that as an example, as a step moving towards reconciliation.
We have some late breaking news here. This is just in. The federal government's committing $40 billion to First Nations child welfare. The funding is going to be announced tomorrow during the government's economic and fiscal update. Part of the funds are apparently going to provide compensation to children and families who were caught up in that child welfare system. Of course, you'll remember in September 2019, the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal had ordered the government to pay $40,000 to each of the children and families affected. That order has been under appeal, awaiting a negotiated settlement. The $40 billion also is reportedly going to implement reforms to First Nations child welfare. We will know more about all of this tomorrow, hopefully. We're going to go now to Iqaluit. 60 days after their crisis started, it's over, at least their immediate crisis, that is. The Nunavut Health Department announced late Friday that the city had passed 3 water quality tests and declared that the water was now fit to drink. You'll recall that they had no running water since October. That's when fuel was discovered in their water system. Our Kent Driscoll is going to join us now from the Iqaluit Bureau. Kent, how's the mood in Iqaluit right now?
Well, plenty of relief, Melissa, that's for sure. Even if you had a vehicle and a schedule flexible enough to meet the water distribution times, this is still a huge hassle for Iqaluit residents. It was another pickup and lineup. And the thing about Iqaluit is we're a city of lineups. You got to line up at the post office, you got to line up at the supermarket. So the removal of one more lineup, that is a legitimate load off the community's mind.
You know, so the armed forces, after a few setbacks, which we covered here on APTN National News, you know, we're back to producing potable water for Iqaluit residents before the water all clear came in. How would you say the armed forces did in their service delivery through all of this?
Well, there's a phrase from the Star Wars movies that really applies here, from a certain point of view. Now, on one hand, they were only able to provide water for 13 of the 60 days we were without it. On the other hand, they took equipment that had never been used in this environment before by them to a setting above the tree line, and they still managed to make it work. So one of the things the Armed Forces does do is analyze their performance from different operations such as this one. So from one point of view, they've got a lot to learn from this one. Residents, we're just happy to get those guys home before Christmas.
Well, and speaking of lessons learned, I mean, what's the takeaway? What are the lessons to be learned from public officials up there?
Well, the discussions about who knew what and when are going to be a big deal going forward. The amount of time between when the residents first discovered the smell of gas in the water and when the do not consume order came in was longer than a week. There's questions there, and when the Legislative Assembly gets back to work, they'll be asking those questions. And then the day it was announced, the Health Department knew early in the day that they were going to put in a do not consume order. They didn't tell residents until 6 o'clock that night. We only found out at around 3 o'clock that day when the mayor put it out in his Twitter account, despite the wishes of the Health Department. So there's going to be lots of questions as to how information was managed throughout this crisis, for sure.
You know, there's that bigger issue at play when it comes to Iqaluit's water, the safety of the overall water supply. Does this 60 days change how residents are looking at the water supply? Does it change how city officials are looking at it?
Well, that's the thing, Melissa. It's a much bigger issue than just these last 60 days. The long-term issue is our reservoir doesn't store enough to supply for the city. It's just simply not big enough. Now, the city estimates anywhere between $120 and $180 million worth of work to get the water system where it needs to be. And as is usual in Nunavut, one problem sort of leads right into the next one. Take a look at the water issue. Because we don't have enough water, we can't zone new lots for building because there's not enough water to supply those apartments. Because we can't build new lots, the current price of housing in Nunavut, in Iqaluit in particular, is going through the roof. So the water crisis is hurting the housing crisis. All of these things are connected. So in a lot of ways, these water problems aren't the end of it. This is really just the beginning, Melissa.
Well, we appreciate you taking the time to update us, and we're happy for you, Kent, and your family. No more lugging water like the good old days. I'm sure that you got, well, lucky for you, you've got some big strapping kids that would have helped you out there, but I'm sure you guys are all fitter than ever from hauling those big pails of water that we saw last week.
3 flights of stairs, Melissa. I live at the top of 3 flights of stairs. I'm happy it's over too. Koyanamik.
Well, there's COVID-19 cases are declining in the Yukon, with the exception of a spike in cases at the territory's only jail and the territory's only fly-in community. Here's Sarah Connors with a bit of an update.
While COVID-19 case numbers are declining in the Yukon, we're not out of the woods just yet. This morning, an outbreak of COVID-19 was declared at the Whitehorse Correctional Center. The outbreak includes 3 cases of COVID, and contact tracing is ongoing. Control measures are in place to prevent spread, and all visitation to the facility has been canceled until further notice. It's important to note here that typically the majority of inmates at the jail are Indigenous. As of November 15th, 41 out of 56 inmates at the jail self-identified as Indigenous. The virus has also made its way to the territory's only fly-in community. In Old Crow, which is home to the Vuntut-Gwitchin First Nation, there is 1 active case of COVID and 5 presumptive cases. A spokesperson for the First Nation told me there was 3 other confirmed cases which are no longer active. Travel to the small community of 220 people is limited to essential travel only, or it has to be approved by council. The First Nations offices will likely be closed until Christmas. There are currently 53 active cases of COVID-19 in the Yukon, most of which are in Whitehorse. Sarah Connors, APTN National News, Whitehorse.
Thanks, Sarah. We've got lots of news still ahead, but we have to take a break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Well, we're heading to the East Coast now. The Wolastoqey Nation has filed an Aboriginal title claim against New Brunswick. It covers 60% of that province. It also names forestry companies in that claim. Premier Blaine Higgs says that private property is at risk and that the economy is going to crash. But AFN Regional Chief Joanna Bernard says that that's wrong and it's fear-mongering. We're joined now by Angel Moore, our Atlantic Bureau correspondent. She's going to help us make sense of all of this. Angel, Premier Higgs says that private homeowners' property is at risk, yet the claim clearly states the opposite. Can you explain the misunderstanding that's going on here?
Yeah, thank you. There is a misunderstanding, and one of the Wolastoqey chiefs explained it, that it always causes a lot of confusion. There is a difference between a Aboriginal title claim and a land claim. Land claims are usually about First Nations communities where, you know, the allocated reserve that we used to call them was given to the First Nation, and over the years it has become smaller or different parcels of land, and normally the First Nation files a claim and there's usually compensation for that land. It's more like a property thing. Aboriginal title claim, as everyone probably all knows, that is the traditional territory before European contact. And that's what the Wolastoqey are interested in. And with Premier Higgs' reaction, it was quite severe. And it seems, the chiefs told me that it seems like the the Premier is not too clear about what Aboriginal title claim is. His reaction was quite swift and very strong. You know, he said it was unprecedented and it would cost, you know, would it cost $2 trillion or $3 trillion, or, you know, how can this be done? And he seemed to be quite overwhelmed and worried about the future of the province.
Quite overwhelmed, maybe not really understanding what's going on there. What's the relationship like between the province of New Brunswick and the First Nations, if you can give us any sort of insight into that?
Well, you know, I think people are aware if they've been following the news. You know, in June 2020, there was 2 police shootings. Chantal Moore was shot at her doorstep in Edmundston by a police officer during a wellness check. Rodney Levi was shot about 9 days later at a home as well, and it turned into it was a mental wellness check, and he was shot dead on the spot. After that happened, you know, there was outrage in the Wolastoqey community and the Mi'kmaq community for this entire region, actually. And the chiefs in New Brunswick called on the Premier for a Indigenous-led inquest, and which the Premier denied. You know, and there's been walks and calls for justice ever since for the injustices and discrimination in the justice system and in policing. Also, with the Truth and Reconciliation Day that we just had, the New Brunswick government refused to make that day a provincial holiday, besides calls from the chiefs and from the people and from survivors for that day. Also, there is a Truth and Reconciliation process going on that the province is conducting, and the chiefs have spoken publicly saying that they're not being consulted or taking part of this process. About a month ago, there was a memo leaked from the New Brunswick government that the government employees were not to say land acknowledgements anymore. So, you know, that's just a recent history of the relationship between the Premier and the First Nations, including the Mi'kmaq as well.
Yeah, well, certainly not ideal. I just want to ask you another thing. So the Wolastoqey, they also named corporations in the claim, right? Mm-hmm. So what do they want exactly?
Well, they're naming corporations. This Aboriginal title claim was actually filed a year ago, and the Wolastoqey chiefs didn't make any progress. They were trying to speak with the province and have talks and negotiations, and they became frustrated, and they decided to add the corporations, which is Irving and New Brunswick Power. Mm-hmm. Irving is a huge company in New Brunswick, and part of the traditional territories of the Wolastoqey is the lumber industry that Irving has enjoyed for many decades, and also 18 of their subsidiaries are named. So these companies and New Brunswick Power have made you know, fortunes off of the resources and the use of traditional territory, and the chiefs are saying, you know, we want to be part of that, and we wanted to be consulted with that. As said in their treaties, their peace and friendship treaties, the Wolastoqey with the Crown says that the Wolastoqey have the right to hunt, fish, trap, and live on their traditional territories as they did before European contact. Mm-hmm. Just the same as the Mi'kmaq also have those same peace and friendship treaties, signed different years, of course, mm-hmm. But the same idea. The Mi'kmaq are actually also in the process of filing an Aboriginal title claim, and their elders and knowledge keepers are working to develop a map of their traditional territory. Currently, they are in negotiations with the provincial government. Apparently, it's not going very well, but they have not filed in court yet. Mm-hmm. And I spoke to new Regional Chief Joanna Bernard, who actually just found out she became Regional Chief in the midst of all this happening. She said what the Wolastoqey are doing are paving the road for the Mi'kmaq and for other First Nations. And her response to Premier Higgs was that he was a ding-dong because she says, and the other Willistic Way chiefs say that, you know, he's fear-mongering, and what he's saying is actually not valid. He was criticized the next day by his opposition in the legislative building. So this will be interesting. They don't expect this to be resolved for probably a decade. Wow. But the process will be interesting, I think, as it develops, you know, and there's a response from both sides.
Well, we appreciate this update, Angel. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much, and have a good day.
Time for us to take another break, but when we come back, an ode to the Granny Hanky. Stay with us. Welcome back. Let's take a look now at tomorrow's weather forecast. To the east coast, we got sunshine, -1 for Fredericton, -5 and sunny in St. John's. Cartwright, -8 with cloud. Kuujjuaq, -12 and sunny. Saddle Hills, snow and -10, 0 and snow for Montreal. -2 and snow for Ottawa. North Bay, snow, +1. -5 and cloud for Sioux Lookout. Sunshine and -7 for Big Trout Lake. -15 and snow for Churchill. Puckatawaga, -16. Snow expected there. Sunshine and -2 for Winnipeg, Grey Cup champions. -8 and sunny for Saskatoon. -7 in Yorkton, sunshine there. -3 in Buffalo Narrows, snow expected. Uranium City also snowing, but -16. Snow and -7 for Fort McMurray. -4 and sunshine for Grand Prairie. Lots of -2s there and sunshine for Calgary, Lethbridge, Medicine Hat. Same with Kamloops. -4 and sunny for Quesnel. Bella Coola, some snow, 3 degrees. Prince Rupert, showers and 6 degrees. -18 in Fort Nelson and some sunshine. Sunny in Rock River, -21. Watson Lake, -25 and snow. Wauatee, -19 and snow. Sunshine for Fort Leard and Trout Lake, -17 there. Inuvik, -20 and sunny. Sax Harbor, snow and -17. Arviat, -7 and snow. Cambridge Bay, snow, -23. Pangertung, -20 and clear sky with Clyde River. Well, as more people get vaccinated, it means that some COVID restrictions are starting to lift in Alberta, and that means for local artists, Christmas might be back to a little closer to normal. We're going to check in with Tamara Pimentel, who's checking in at a craft market in Tsuut'ina.
It's the busiest time of the year, or since COVID started, for these local businesses. A packed sportsplex on Tsuut'ina Nation, bustling with holiday shoppers, is a breath of fresh air for Alberta Otter.
The minute I put my box on, I sold an item right away. Just to have that sale hand-to-hand thing again was just like, it kind of just made my heart pumping. It's got me excited and happy. Because it's just like, we get to go back to being normal finally, just except for the mask.
The Christmas on the Nation market is the first of its kind on Tsuut'ina, bringing many Calgarians in to support these artists, bouncing back from the pandemic and bringing exposure to featured artists like Stephanie One Spot.
My major is painting, but I really enjoy doing photography as well. The exposure is really nice because it's bringing me a lot of attention to my art, but also it's allowing me to tell my stories.
But for Otter, a self-taught beater of 20 years, it's also about getting back to her roots.
I'm a third generation residential school survivor. I'm a survivor of what my mom went through and what she passed down to me. The first thing that I beaded was a Calgary Flames medallion, and it didn't look nothing like a Calgary Flames medallion when I was done it. So from me going from that and then me getting to look at something like this that I've done, it really blows me away.
Her beadwork such a hit, an interview with APTN can't get in the way of a sale.
Every single item I do, it really comes from my heart. Because I got my culture back and I get to share it with others.
Tamara Pimentel, APTN National News, Tsuut'ina Nation.
Well, we're going to go now to the Yukon, where an artist is transforming the Granny Hanky. She's using her own beading and a little bit of technology to do so. Here's Sarah Connors again with that story.
Kaylin Baker is trading needle and thread for an iPad and a stylus, putting a new spin on an age-old accessory.
So this is kind of a nod to that.
This hanky is part of a new line of Indigenous granny hankies. They feature blown-up images of Baker's beadwork, like this hanky.
Isolated the fireweed from a previous purse, or the hummingbird.
Baker says she got the idea for hankies while working on a project for a Canada Council grant earlier this summer. After ordering some online, she says she was amazed by how good they looked.
It turned out so well, and like the colors really came through, and I just it was real. Like I thought this could happen. I'm gonna try.
1 month in, Baker has already had 300 orders, some from as far away as New Mexico. Even Indigenous influencers like Peachsicle on TikTok are sporting her designs.
The fact that people, love it, it just makes me feel really, really great.
She says it's a tedious process to create a hanky. Each design takes around 10 hours to complete.
I think that doing all that beadwork for all these years kind of really prepared me mentally, and just to be able to sit there all day and isolate one bead at a time.
The process starts with Baker taking photos of completed beadwork. Using her iPad, she separates the beadwork from the background, then plans the design of the hanky. While it's more technology-focused than traditional beading, Baker says the creative process is similar.
It does take a long time, and it is very special to me, and each piece is has its own story.
Baker hopes to eventually integrate artwork from elders and youth in her home community of Pelly Crossing into the hankies.
There's so many talented artists from Pelly Crossing, and if I could just kind of help give back in that way, I would really love to do that and to help out.
She's collaborating with other Indigenous entrepreneurs like Yukon Soaps Company, which will use an upcoming hanky design for soap packaging. With more requests for orders rolling in, Baker is excited to see where the hanky business takes her.
It's been amazing to see how much of a impact it makes on people when it's just something that I just sit here and do.
Sarah Connors, APTN National News, Whitehorse.
Well, it is welcome back to Winnipeg for the 108th Grey Cup. The Winnipeg Blue Bombers and the Hamilton Ticats battled it out last night in a rematch. It was the second time that they've met, I guess, 2019 and then again last night. Sold-out Hamilton crowd was treated to a game as it was really tight battle, but right to the end, with both teams holding leads throughout the game. The game needed overtime, and Darvin Adams caught the go-ahead touchdown for Winnipeg. With Hamilton needing to score, the Winnipeg defense came up with a championship-winning interception. It was a nail-biter for sure, with Winnipeg winning in overtime. 33-25 was the final score.
It's a surreal feeling. It's an amazing feeling, and I couldn't be happier to share it with the group of guys that I'm sharing it with. I've never been in a locker room like this one. We all had to be resilient, all of us, players, our wives, the coaches, and total team effort by everybody involved.
That's your APTN National News for tonight. I'm Melissa Ridgen. Have a great night. See you tomorrow.